Okay, thank you guys for coming. This is the Sanctuary Improvement Committee up here. If you were here for the meat raffle, you're in the wrong spot. So we got together, we were asked to get together and put together a proposal. Some of the members and other people were having a desire to do a little remodeling in the church. We will go over that stuff tonight and hopefully answer any questions you guys have. And I just want to say thank you guys for coming, and hopefully we can answer all your questions.
Okay, the first section of our project has already been completed. That's just repainting the sanctuary walls. That was done last year. And what we're moving into now is getting recommendations, ideas for redoing the pews, recushioning it, reupholstering, and also recarpeting the aisles and under the floor, or under the pews, I'm sorry. So we've gotten a few quotes, quite a few quotes, for both the pews and the carpeting. And what we're bringing to you tonight is what our recommendations are. For the pews, we're recommending that we go with wood church interiors. We feel that they'll give us the most for the dollar, replacing foam, the upholstery itself, and redoing the wood, cleaning and refurnishing, just redoing it, everything to make it look like new again. So the quote that we've got from Wood Church Interiors is $9,645. And that's what the group is recommending. We have not picked out upholstery colors or patterns or anything like that. We've got some ideas up here for you to look at this evening and give us some insight too. So I guess open that portion up for questions. Lane.
What I'm asking about right now is removing the pews in the balcony. I'm not saying I'm against it, but if we're replacing with chairs, I think it would be important to purchase chairs that look decent. I'm not trying to add money to this, but I just don't like to see folding chairs, or we used to call them rusties from Gusty because they were chairs from Gustavus. And what about the new AV booth equipment? Are you replacing the one that Paul Bodie made?
You're talking about the sound booth? There's been discussion, I'm not on that committee, but there's been discussion about a new sound booth that's going to be able to hold the newer equipment that we have. So there'll be updated equipment, updated wiring, and I believe an updated booth. I'm not 100% sure where that's going yet, so I haven't heard details on that quite yet. But we did talk about trying to work in conjunction with them as far as getting wiring up here. For recommendation number 3, if that wiring's being done, we want to rewire up here as well, electrical and audio as well. Okay, so Lane just said, just to repeat for everybody, that whatever we do for the booths, just to make it match the rest of the furniture of the sanctuary. Is that okay, summary?
Any other questions?
If you wanted to take a chance to look online to see what some of the refinished pews look like, just a quick reminder with that second quote, we spent a lot of time talking about this in our committee meetings. If the difference between the quotes is, remember the first quote is not refinishing the pews at all. The second quote would be refinishing all the pews to bring them up so they're nice. Yeah.
While you're redoing the pews, has there been any discussion on changing out the current hymnal holders if we do shift to adding or changing our hymnals? The Lutheran service book, I believe, would take more space, would it not, Lane? Is it not thicker? Now is a great time to do that.
Where's Austin when you need him?
Our committee has not talked about hymnals, but we can put that down. My guess is we won't talk about hymnals much, but as far as if the congregation wanted to do a different hymnal, it wouldn't be a bad time to talk about it. But
Okay, anything else? Our committee more or less just concentrated on the lower level here, the pews, the flooring, and the possible remodeling of the altar area. And that's as far as we've gotten. But we're trying to get ahead of any more price increases. So like the quoted price here for the pew work and the flooring, prices are guaranteed through the end of May with a possible, probable increase after that. So that's where we're kind of trying to speed things up and make a decisions.
also we talked about if we are replacing pews up top with nicer chairs like Lane suggested, we wouldn't have to have them finish those pews, obviously, so we'd save some costs there that could go towards pew chairs, whatever chairs we put up there.
Any other questions? Okay, let's move on to recommendation number 2 then. That's the new flooring for the narthex, the entryway, and the sanctuary. The committee is recommending carpet runners for the center and side aisles and carpet squares for under the church pews so that any spills and stains can be easily repaired. The new flooring for the entryway, the deacon's room, the flooring for the sanctuary from the back up to the front pillars would be hired out. I'm not expecting any of us to do the physical work except for removing the pews and moving them out of the way for the carpet layers. And then we've got some colors and styles we'd like to survey you tonight just to get some ideas of what the preference is. I know we can't please every one of us, but we want to please the majority. Okay. The pew spacing, right now the pews are tight to move in and out. So there are 12 inches, I guess, of knee room is how you would say it. We want to increase that to 16 inches just to, for safety and accessibility. There are currently 18 pews on each side. After the spacing, we would lose 2 pews on each side, so we'd be down to 16 pews. And then we're also recommending that we would angle the pews slightly, 3 degrees, so give a better visual angle to the pulpit and to the front where the pastors are. So, acoustic considerations, we want to research this a little bit more, and then the committee wants to research the updated narthex area entryway, but that's something in the future. Again, we had 3 quotes for carpet and laminate flooring. Everybody that we've talked to said laminate probably is not the answer for us, being on a slight incline and then coming in off the street and the steps with wet shoes and so on. It's going to be slippery. So we kind of ruled that out, cost-wise also. And we're recommending that we go with independent flooring. Their quote with the high-grade carpet, I assume it's similar to what we've had here. It's lasted 50 years, so hopefully we can get another 50 out of it. It's $17,800. We would have to remove the pews and get them out of the way, but then they would remove and dispose of the old carpet and lay down the new. So, and again, we're recommending rolled carpet in the entryway, the deacon's room, and down the aisles, and then carpet tiles underneath the pews. And the total cost there is $17,800. Any questions? Yeah.
As far as the funding goes, we do have, at the end, we'll talk a little bit more about that. There's $5,300 in the fund right now. We believe the whole project would be under $50,000. There are some members who have said that they've already wanted to contribute to the whole thing. So it could very well already all be covered. But we also want the congregation to be able to contribute to it as well. The committee hasn't been super worried about funding. I think, will we all agree that we would like to do all 3 at the same time? I mean, as far as if we're going to do it all.
Since one would have carpet squares and also rolled carpet, is there a chance that after a period of time edges would come up and people could trip?
There shouldn't be a problem. We've got carpet squares in the office area, and that is, there's a seam every 2.5 feet, and that is not let loose, that's not come up. So I don't think that would be a problem. Mike?
That reference is incorrect. It should be number 3. We had the painting as recommendation number 1, but that was already done, so that should have been corrected. On page 2, under notes, second bullet point, should read, but only if recommendation number 3 passes. Should be, because if the pews are angled and the pulpit stays place, then this angle over here wouldn't make much sense with the pulpit there. Recommendation number 3 has the pulpit coming more central behind us over here, and that pew angle on this side would then point more towards the middle. And when we get into the pictures at the end, we can spend a lot more time talking about those too. Hopefully that'll help.
Yes.
I'm wondering, you noted that we get into that, but are we finding out if everybody's in agreement with moving the pulpit?
So the plan for tonight is we were asked as a committee to provide information for the voters to make a decision. So we're trying to gather congregational input so that we can revise our recommendations to the voters. So we're trying to get congregational insight and information. So yeah, we can decide as we can do that at the end. I would assume, show of hands or something like that, as far as the interest is that and how that goes. We're looking for feedback from the congregation direct to change the recommendations as they stand if we need to.
Bennett?
This might be an odd question, but was there any discussion about cutting the pews in half? Like, you talked about angling it, so you would obviously need a little more room as an angle. I don't know if that makes sense to you or not, if you had the two sides flare out. The drawing will show that the angle of 2 degrees. Correct. And my question was, can we discuss the option of cutting the pews in half? We have not.
We talked about it as a committee, but the extra work and trying to make sure that everything was, if you look underneath the pews, as far as structurally matching the stain, all of that, and then what we would lose for seating, we didn't think that was a good idea. We only talked about it once or twice, but it wasn't very long.
I understand the only issue then with seating is probably Christmas, right? The only time you've ever had this place full.
Maybe a very, very large wedding or funeral.
Correct. But I think if you're going to angle those pews, you would cut that in half, you would slide those over, that would create an extra row. Plenty of times to come in here in church, and there's nobody in the middle. Very long.
No, that's a good. Your point is there's nobody in the middle to create more, and that's why when we did discuss that, the extra 4 inches will make a huge difference between the pews as far as people getting to the middle or not. You'll be able to get around knees a lot better. So we did talk about that. Yeah.
Yeah. Okay.
Was the angle of the pew taken into effect based on the fact that this is an auditorium style floor? Because if you change the angle, don't you have to build up on one side or you or not?
Yeah, we did take that into account, and we discussed that we would obviously have to shim up one side of the pew or something to make sure that they're level because of their floor slope. So it is something we did consider if we decide to angle the pews.
Lane?
My concern is about the church entryway with the carpet. It has not lasted. It's worn. The deacon's room looks terrible. And nothing about the deacons, but it does look terrible. And in the school, we did put in the new flooring. We got rid of the carpet. And we haven't had too many big accidents in there. And I know that older people are coming in, and I'm one of those. But I think if we'd have some things, some mats like we do in the entryway already, I'm just concerned that that carpet isn't going to hold up. And we're going to be in the same shape we're at now in the narthex.
The squares would be only under the pews. The entryway, narthex, and the aisles would be rolled carpet.
Maybe you want to reconsider the narthex being squares if the concern is that it will wear out.
We could.
Travis can help me on this one, but the Board of Property last spring was talking about that with the difference between the rolled carpet and carpet squares in the entryway. And I believe the property at that point in time didn't want to do carpet tiles primarily because of carpet squares. Is Fred's here. Fred, do you remember that discussion that we had last spring about the entryway?
I had a member ask me to ask a question. I said I would. Ask this on my behalf. Did you check into doing tile on the aisles and carpet only under the pew area and in front of the pews? Seems like that would be the best for sound. And I said, I'll ask on your behalf, what type of tile are you thinking? And his reply was just, I think just regular tile and carpet.
I have been studying acoustics and doing a lot of research. We need the carpet, otherwise we couldn't hear each other at all if this was a solid surface. We need a shag rug and then really soak up some sound, but we're not asking for shag rug. Acoustics is not, we're not discussing that as for panel hearing. That's not in it.
Okay, well, you mentioned that you want to research this more maybe after the remodel, but that may be too late depending what you want to do with acoustics. Anybody that was here for the first church service in the new building in 1972, it was graduation. There were no pews in here, there was no carpet, and like you said, the sound really, there was no roof. And you could clearly hear anybody speaking. And that was the original design when they designed this church, was that there wouldn't need to be any amplification. And it was pretty clear when there was no, now we have padded seats and carpet everywhere, but it's just if you were, depending what you wanted with acoustics, once you have carpet down, it's gonna be too late if you wanted to liven it up. And as long as if I can just go one step further, the piano would be a lot brighter if there was a solid surface under the piano rather than a sponge, which is what the carpet is. So if you're looking at putting that up, on the up farther, if it was solid underneath, the piano would be a lot brighter.
That disagrees with all that I've been reading online is solid surfaces because there's coefficients for these, but I was saying is that about not carpeting the floor goes against all of the research that I've seen online, that the sound waves will reflect more off of solid surfaces than solid surfaces. When there's more people in this church, the acoustics deaden some. And that's because we absorb the sound waves. The body does.
Well, thank you. About the carpet squares, first of all, they fade out, you know. And so when you put a new one in and replace it, you're going to notice them all over the place, you know. Depends, you know, how it goes. So, well, I don't care about the rolled carpet either necessarily, but the squares aren't, you know, perfect in that sense. And then another thing, Gus Davis, Big Chapel only has concrete on the floor. They don't have anything on there. And they get along pretty good. I don't think they have anything. And they have a beautiful sound system, you know.
And our old church did not have any carpeting, and we had a beautiful sound. So I don't know, you know, what you're reading, but.
It's on the internet. I believe everything on the internet. Okay, a response here.
Just to respond to the carpet tile in the entryway again, I think because of the sunlight there, I do remember the Board of Property saying they were going against the carpet tile there because the sunlight would fade, and if you had to replace the worn area, then you're going to have faded carpet tile and not faded carpet tile. I remember hearing a number of members saying that in their businesses too. Anytime you replace a worn one with a new one, it's going to look very different, at least for a while. So that's why I think the Board of Property said, let's just do rolled out there. Hopefully it'll last 20 years. But that's the most high traffic area with the most salt and snow and rain. So we're going to have to replace the entryway more often than anywhere else. Oh, and the other thing too that Russ didn't say, because he's been sharing all the information with us that he's been doing the acoustics. The committee is not suggesting that we're not trying to remove the acoustics. We want acoustics. This is a balanced acoustics, so that word's very important. But we discussed this as a committee, and once the remodel stuff was all done, then we would talk more about how can we balance that acoustical feedback better.
Well, just a quick notation, and Carl is not here, but Fred is, and just because Carl has mentioned that his dad, Fred's and Carl's dad, laid this carpet, and he noted that the absolute best carpet out there at that time, durability, which it has proven for 50 years, was in fact put in. Perhaps the places you are looking at are in fact that carpet. We might want to find out what this carpet was, and if you're looking for durability, you know, added dollars that way. I kind of agree with Gary with respect of if pieces are put in and out. I understand why people want perhaps squares though too. It's a rock and a hard spot. But perhaps finding out what carpet was, if that carpet is still being made, and if you want durability, I'd say we should consider possibly just seeing if that's still available, that a version of that.
We did look at higher quality.
And let me guess, price was a scary item.
Well, Dennis can answer that.
You know, we get what we pay for.
Yep, the carpet that we priced here, as far as I know, is the highest grade that they made, or at least carry. I think it was a 32-ounce nylon carpet. I don't know if they make anything better or not, but not that they indicated to us anyway. So Kyle?
Speaking of that narthex thing. Wait. The acoustic, I can't because the acoustics.
Speaking more for that narthex thing again, we did, when we were talking about replacing the windows, talked to a couple of glass installers, and they said that if you wanted to, because I remember the discussion about putting in curtains or blinds in the narthex to take away some of the sunlight. The idea was also put forth that we put tint on the windows as well. So there is that option as well. But that's not part of your purview in any of these recommendations, but that doesn't mean that it can't happen either.
Questions? More questions?
I take it this whole plan now just goes to the windows there. You don't worry about the outside part of the, those steps need replacing out there, terrible, you know. If we want to remodel or fix something up, that would be the real thing to put some money into, because that's the first thing people see right away. My opinion on that. Only maybe we're going to move too before this. We don't know.
Probably not in my lifetime.
We have talked about entryway ideas, and I think that's been, I've had a number of people sharing things that have been brought up in the past about the entryway, Gary. So none of that falls under here. We're primarily focusing on interior sanctuary. That would be more exterior. And that is something that the committee would like to do, to discuss more with the congregation after we took care of the interior. You don't have to be sorry.
Okay. Any other questions on flooring or upholstery? Any ideas? Lane?
Well, just once again, was there ever a thought of continuing the hard surface that we've put in the school hallways? Just because if you look at other churches like Bethlehem just put on a new addition, Hosanna, St. John the Baptist, those churches, are they putting carpeting in their entryways? That if they're not doing it, then it might be a good idea for us not to, if we can have those mats or something. I think it would be so much easier to clean. And in the school, I think people are responding to it. So I just thought I wanted to share that. And we now have a new scrubber, so that would be helpful.
I have wanted to go to my boss's church. It was a brand new church, and they built it with acoustics in mind, and I wanted to go there. And I'm certainly willing to go to those other churches and hear things. Because we did talk about, before carpet, solid.
I tend to agree with Lane. The polyurea has worked really well in the south entry and the hallway. And with Cintas coming in and doing rugs every other week, it seems to, even after a snowfall, there's minimum slippage and water on the stairs. So I think that's a great solution for the entryway. I don't think you're worried about acoustics in the entryway, so a hard surface makes sense.
We did bid the narthex for that polyurea. This was 3 or 4 years ago. We're looking at probably close to $5,000 for the narthex alone. And then also I did have them bid the upper balcony and the staircases leading up to the balcony for an additional $4,000. This was 3 or 4 years ago, like I said, and he said it probably would go up about 5% a year. So that's another thing we can look into as well. We did plan that ahead, but you know, obviously we didn't have the money for that. So it's out there, and he knows that we are looking into it. So it is out there.
Okay, any other questions, ideas? Okay, moving on to our recommendation number 3, as the remodeling the altar area. And the committee is recommending that along with carpet, the altar be updated and redesigned for better functionality. There would not be any kneelers at the communion rail. This would be a stand-up communion situation. The altar furniture would be reused with this new design. And then I can read through some of the other points that we've made. We'd update the look and the feel, better height and visibility for parishioners. The pulpit move would be more centrally located. Then we'd add a lectern to match the current pulpit altar. Make the pulpit and lectern portable when extra space is required, for instance, Christmas Eve, choir concerts, and so on. Move the more riser space for choirs, gives more floor space. More space for families around the baptismal font, because that would be also elevated. More altar space area, special uses for Lent, Good Friday, weddings, and so on. Easier access to altar, use for storage, better audio hookup options, better communion flow with the extended first step, better communion serving with the extended first step, user-friendly space for singers, musicians. Graduation ceremony will function better with back steps and removable pulpit and lectern. And estimated cost for this, we're just guessing now with lumber skyrocketing. We're just taking a stab in the dark and saying 15,000.
We have a worked out budget that's actually 11,800, but so we have with all those materials, that was an updated one from the last spring that we put together. So yeah, it has gone up quite a bit because that was at around 8,000 last spring. So we put 15,000 down just based on what we did for research for pricing. Travis did a lot of that pricing, and we're looking at so we're just, it's the estimated total. This is a little bit higher than we think it might be, but it could be a little bit higher than that too.
Now, questions, we probably would want to go to the picture section now to just compare what we do have with what we are proposing and go ahead.
What's labeled as the current model is not quite current. I took out a pew when I just did a minimal update to move the piano. So it's not current. Yeah, well, the top view of the new, I would say that the drawings, I'm glad we put them together. It isn't a big change. The cross is going to stay. The brick are going to stay. What Marty did, the stucco, that will stay. The base, the furniture will all stay, or remodeled. It will be there. The biggest portion here, if you look at the top view, new drawing, is the base. The first step comes out to here. That's, I would say, the biggest. And then the altar areas is stepped as it is now, but a little larger. What I like is that the pulpit and potential new lectern will be to the center of the church. And if the pews are angled, they can be directed towards the center, rather than people sitting in that back corner looking way over there. It's a positive thing in my view. Any questions?
Well, first of all, you said the furniture would stay, right? Okay, how would that pulpit get moved up the steps?
A few men carrying it up there. We would modify the pulpit. We would.
When you say move, what do you mean? Like, how will it get moved? Right now, it's not portable because there's a bunch of old cords and electrical that's inside. There's an outlet inside there. So I've moved it by myself, as far as moving it around a little bit. So it's not like crazy heavy, but it's all wired in. Correct. So we don't need the wiring in there, the microphone. We don't use the microphone cord in there. We don't ever use the outlet, to my knowledge. And so it would be portable in the sense that we put padding underneath it. And so in the new altar area, 2 or 3 guys could lift it up, put it in the back so that children could be up there for Christmas Eve services. And that would be true for both the lectern and the pulpit. Yep.
Sorry, I didn't understand your question.
I'm all for maintenance, like carpet and the pews, and to keep this place in good shape. But I do have a problem with pulling apart and redoing the altar, because that altar area, that has been there for 50 years, and all those 50 years, I've never heard anybody say anything about that we needed to change the configuration of the altar for any of these reasons. I don't know, maybe some of you have, but I've never heard it. And I have a suggestion, because that being said, I know the musicians want more space. And if we could leave the altar area as is, except for new carpet, why couldn't we take these first 2 pews, like cut it right in half here, and this part would be open then. That would make it to here. And then you'd have all this open space, and receptacles could be put for your plugins, and the piano's right there, and it wouldn't be up front. We wouldn't see all the things.
That is sort of what is in this view, that top view. That was my first thought. I drew up 2 views, but.
Okay, but that would be my suggestion, to just, because people come in here and they've said, that's such a pretty altar area. It's kind of fanned out like that. And I don't see any reason why we have to change that, especially if we're talking about moving someday, which we don't know if we are or not. But that way, to me, it seems like the main reason to change everything is so that you musicians have more room. And this way you would have more room. You'd have from here all the way, all this area. And you wouldn't have to change the whole configuration of the altar. Just my opinion.
Well, I don't believe anybody on the committee believes that we have to change it, but those on the committee would like to see some changes, and so that's why we're here to talk about this.
Yeah, I'm certainly not opposed to the stage up front, but I do have a couple questions concerning it. First, the page number 6, the new view, as you're facing the altar on the left, what is the rise of that and the stage area? And yeah, does it not, that does not need a railing at 14 inches? Because it's not a, there's a small set of steps behind the post, but then the rest is a 14-inch rise. He's okay. Then my second concern would be, I assume all of the staging material would be wood.
Plywood, yes.
Have we thought about, I just know what wood does over time. It starts to squeak and make noise.
It's going to be glued. I learned that from Lauren. Glue and screw. You won't squeak.
I am looking at the top view, new page 4, and with the piano set where it is, I feel like if you were to push that piano behind the beam there, what does that really do for you for room? I'm guessing you're going to keep the piano you have, right? It's not like a smaller one on the picture, but if you literally take that piano and set it back behind the beam here, it looks like it'd be pretty tight. So by pushing the piano back there, you're going to have a better flow for communion? Or once a month? Right, my point is though, when that piano is back to how you have it designed, yes.
That piano is the scale. I measured it. So.
Okay. My point is it looks cramped, and I've known that when you do have other instruments, that you already fill that area without that railing coming across, correct? I mean, a couple drums and a couple guitars and your amps and your hookups, when you're in that area, like you've done in the past, you're kind of struggling to have, it looks a little cramped back there. And if you're looking to have more room for playing music, I would like to see, yeah, the first 2 pews out would make more sense and leave the altar up front the way it is, personally.
By the way, personally, it's the only thing I'm really concerned about with the music stuff is just people tripping over stuff up there, and then all the chords. I know I've talked about this with several people. With that raised platform, all the wiring would be able to be underneath that for the most part, so it wouldn't look so wiry. But the other thing too is that, again, if you're thinking communion or just normal tripping, building code things, right now, if you have just a piano here, that's cool, but you have a small triangle basically, because again, you need an aisle here, you need the aisle around here, and you need the aisle in front of the screen up there, that first screen. So with the platform, and I apologize, what we should have done is had taped, at one point we had tape down here. The first communion rail would be right about where I'm standing. So instead of having a little triangle back here, and it being kind of a mess, which I apologize and am embarrassed about most of the time, this would be a whole rectangle back here, and most of the wires would be buried. So no one would have to walk through the musician's place at all, because it would be up on the platform, and the communion rail would be all in front of the equipment. The piano would be able to go towards the back, and it would be a lot. We spend a lot of time whenever we practice in here trying to figure out what's the best way to do this, how's it going to help in the choir practices, and it's just this functionality. And this is kind of to your point, Vivian, too, which I agree with, is that, as far as comments go, I love the way this is, but as far as functionality goes, I think from this standpoint, from the altar area up front here, I think more room would be better. I know we have to sacrifice a pew or two up front, but yeah. Right. The other thing that, like Russ is saying here too, it's hard to see because when we did the pictures of Russ's drawings here, the top one, the current view, is actually a little bit more zoomed in, the bottom one. So the new altar area would everything that you'd see here, a few people asked us at one point in time, well, do we have to jackhammer all this out? And the answer is no. The new altar area would totally cover everything here. It would be that much higher too. So again, visibility and sight lines and everything would be a lot better. I think that's a fair word to use. My family sits over here quite a bit, and I'm usually sitting on my right cheek most of the time, looking over this way. You'll have a lot less of that. I don't know who's first. Yeah, there's a lot of stuff up there, and there's not. And there would be more space, and depending on how you did that, right behind. Yeah. Do you want? No. Oh. Yeah.
Just cut it out would just give you that space of what you're looking to put up there instead. If it's cut out and the musician pieces are put in there, like we've noted, and other people have noted that, it would give that area for those types of musical instruments and still leave the front, as you said, sir, of being just much more visually appealing and conducive to just seeing the main purpose, the cross.
So I'm guessing if we do the new configuration, you can't reuse the communion rail, correct? Well, that makes sense. The reason for not kneeling at the new rail, is it too high now? Well, can you give him the option? Right. Yeah, the option to kneel. Well, not if there's a kneeler, man, that's concrete. My question is, if you redo the front and you put a new communion rail in, What's the reason for not having kneelers? Okay. No, but it's well, it kind of is because this is what we do in our church. This is our home church, and we've always had the option to kneel. I was just wondering why we take that away. Oh, okay. I just didn't know if it was because it was higher. I get it, it's a space issue. Okay, thanks.
The 3 degrees on tilting the pews, is that just a random degree? It seems very minimal for the effort that's going to be put into it. Could someone address that?
I don't know. I picked 3 degrees because we were talking about it. Do you have another? Well, for your information, I have been sitting in the balcony so long, and that's 10 degrees, and I forgot that they're angled. So 3 degrees won't be a big issue at the screen. I did think of that at first.
The main reason for that we discussed was just because when you have a longer church, the angle can help, especially when you're more up front. You know, in Fond du Lac, when we did that there, it was all straight before, and the angle was put in. And we never heard any negative comments about it. People seemed to, we spaced more, put the angle in, and people seem to generally like that. When you have more of a longer sanctuary, it seems to help. But that was the reason why we put it in there. It would require a little bit of mitering for underneath that, but
this isn't really a question, it's a comment, but if we do put that, if we move to that, the pulpit and the lectern to that other style, it would be a lot easier for the videos if we, you know, like we put that live and stuff, it's a lot, it's more centered. And, you know, I know when I do the video, I mean, it's kind of in the corner, and it would be more, I mean, if we're trying to, I think that's another outreach to others. I mean, you see it on YouTube and stuff, and I mean, I think that would be good to have it, in my opinion, to have it in the center more.
With me being on recess duty, I talked to Erin Radical quite a bit now, and she said the angle that they changed to in Fond du Lac really gave a closeness to it. I don't know what degree they changed.
I like the plan that you have. I think it's more balanced, and I think it's probably a better use of space for that front area. Getting it up, everything raised up a little bit, I think would be nice. Angling the pews, I think all of it will make visibility better. I think it looks cleaner and a little bit more orderly the way with the plan that you have. I like it.
I like the idea that Vivian brought up and Charles brought up about the moving the pews or removing the first 2 pews or removing the 1 pew or whatever it is. The thing that I like about it, aside from its very minimal effort put into the project, the other thing that I can see it being a plus is for Christmas Eve service. The kids can actually move back a little bit from the altar and be more towards the congregation. There's a lot of chairs that go up in front of the church here for the kids between the modesty rail and the communion rail, and it's I mean, we're only going to get a bigger school with more students, so you got to figure out where to put the chairs eventually. So I'm all for everything that you guys have been through as far as what you've gone through for the project. I like the scope of the project. However, if it works out that all we have to do is take out the first pew and move the modesty rail back, that might actually be okay too. So I know, Neil, I talked to you about that, about just removing the one pew. It gives you a little bit more room. That might be all you need. So that's, like I said, that's the effort that I'm willing to put in, all the effort that you guys need me to put into. But I mean, if it just takes moving one pew, let's move one pew.
For the new view, or the new way you have it, did you think of taking a pew out also with that on the left side? Reconfiguring the front and also removing a pew? Or do you feel like with the reconfiguration of it, you wouldn't really need to do that? Because you're really not gaining much space in that area compared to the current with just taking out one pew. You know what I mean? So the current view, and you're proposing to take out just one pew, move the modesty rail back, right? Why wouldn't you do that if you reconfigured the front with a new look? You're moving the altar and the pulpit up, why would you not take a pew out also? On both sides?
I would like to point out on all of the new drawings, the left side are spaced at 18 inches, and you can see in the back it's tight against the back wall. But the right side is what they all fit in 16 inches, and there's 16 pews. So you can count the pews, there are a different number there. So the right side is the proposed. There's there's 6 feet between the communion rails and the, is that what it is? 6'10". About the same. It looks about 6 feet, maybe 8 feet. That's not 12 feet.
Well, first of all, receptacles can be installed over there on concrete floor, you know. They can come up from the basement and that. We did that all the time in places where we had concrete floors. So that's no problem to get the wiring, you know, into that section if it went like that. And another thing is the way it's designed, if we're going to have all those instruments up there, you know, we're going to see that just as much as anything else all the time. Where it would be better if they'd be back and over towards the wall. All the amplifiers and things like that. And what is that steps made out of now? That's up there. Yeah, that's what I thought. So that's nice and quiet.
I agree with Charles' idea that if you put the piano back there, it's going to look really crowded. And I think from a music director's point of view or a accompanist's point of view, if we get to have choirs again, the pianist really needs to see the director and should not be behind the production. It's hard to know how to balance the sound. Secondly, still feel we should have kneelers. It's the only time in this church when we kneel, and I'm not saying we should do it more, but it's just something that's reverent and that's part of our tradition. And I don't want to see that go away, even if it's a trendy thing to go away from kneeling. We're all growing weary of taking communion on our pews the way it is, and I just think it would be nice to keep a communion rail for us.
Regarding the piano, I'm the one who positioned the piano so the pianist could see the director. As I don't have a seat there, a bench drawn in there, but in fact, the way the lid opens, there's a view of the director. As far as the kneeling, I agree too. I sort of don't want to see that go away. But my wife noted that she sees people kneeling after communion by the pew. So it's not like there'll be signs, no more kneeling. But we're hearing a lot of good comments. This is the purpose of this meeting.
I appreciate all the work that the committee's done in coming up with these ideas and things like that. I like the fact that we have a group out there that's looking at the things that we have and making maintenance type suggestions like the padding in the pews and stuff like that. I know if you sit in certain pews, you might say, oh, this isn't so bad, but it's probably because that pew actually hasn't been sat in very much. If you sit in one of those positions where it's sat in every Sunday, you can tell you're sitting on a board. And I know there's spots up in the front there where you can see the concrete sticking through the edges of the carpet and stuff like that. It just looks shabby, and it's just kind of a shame that you come into a place that we dedicate for the worship of our Lord and Savior, and it doesn't look all that great. Kind of think of how the children of Israel thought when they saw their temple in disarray and things like that, and they kind of were upset about that. That being said, I'm not a huge house of the Lord kind of guy myself, but that's okay. As far as the rearranging of things up there, I'm not entirely sold on the idea that that's a necessity. I think there'd be some things that would be pros to it, but I do think there are some cons that maybe need to be considered as well. One of them was the Christmas Eve seating for the kids. We wrap around up there for the kids currently and fill that space up. If you take that away, we're going to take away congregational seating, then we'll have to limit the number of people that come and view Christmas Eve, if that's the case. So some of those things need to be considered carefully if we do make that permanent change as well.
Yeah, we spent time talking about that because on both sides. Yep.
Now, before I was on this committee, I sort of wrestled with having been in East Africa many times. And they don't talk about this sort of thing. They have mud stick walls, a tin roof, and their candles. I remember Pastor Fred, he got some wax in his candle, dipped it on their 2x4 altar and then stuck it in there, and there was his candle holder. But we have the means to do different, and they do too. I also considered, or I've been to their homes. They don't live in luxurious homes. Their church and their home is probably the same. So I took that into account.
Yeah, I don't think the altar area would really matter for Christmas Eve, in my opinion. It's all about square footage and where we can put chairs. So whether it's up on the stage area or down below it, I don't think that'll make a difference. Either way, whether it stays how it is or whether we do this improvement, I think you'll still have the same number of seats for congregational people minus the couple pews you remove, so.
And I don't know that we've talked about this, but the communion rails could be removable too, if we did any changes. So if that would help during Christmas Eve.
I guess I have some trouble with, when I look up at the altar now, it looks like a church altar to me. But this other picture looks like a stage, a square or a rectangular stage. And I don't know, that just makes a difference to me, that it looks like a stage, like we're gonna have a play or something up there, you know? We have a stage down in the basement, so it's square or rectangular. This looks like an altar. It's fanned out, and I like it the way it is.
I agree with you. We don't want this to be a stage. And I have seen my boss's church, and their altar area is down in the front, and their pews are like an arena would be. And their band is right in the middle. So I don't desire to replicate that.
But if you have all your instruments and everything over to that one side, when we look at it, we see that, and somehow that takes away from the look of an altar. That's why I think it'd be better to keep it where it is, and then when you look to the front, you'll see a church altar.
We don't leave our instruments there anyway. Just the stands. So I get your point, but the piano is there, always there. It's not going to disappear very easily. But I get your point. This is a place to worship, not to come for a music show.
Right. And you know, change is good, but sometimes change is not so good. And sometimes it's nice to have a little tradition remain. And I mean, I'm all for maintenance, like we need new carpet, pews, but can't we leave something the same?
This would be, up to us to make sure the pastors don't change what they preach. That's what's going to stay the same, the law and the gospel. And we're not talking about changing any of that, just a little bit in the looks, the appearance.
Hey, can I speak to the square part of it? Because I know when we were talking about that, at one point we did have, now I'm talking about steps 2, 3, and 4 on the new one on page 6. At one point we had those angled more, the corners, and not so square. The reason why we had them more square, again, you see, is we have, they're wider steps too, and if you look from the top view also, you can see that area would be able to support more students and a larger choir. I know choir doesn't sound like something we've had for a long time, but there's more altar area for people to stand up there with. out the kids. So that's why we made that more square on the side, because we wanted more riser space for all the students in the choirs. I mean, we could change that. We just lose that space, and we can make it look more like it does now.
I agree with Viv and what she talked about as a stage up there. When you see the adult choir up there, to me it looks like entertainment. And I think other people thought the same thing too, if you remember a few years ago, when the congregation started clapping. I mean, you're putting the glory in the wrong place there. That's not what the choir is there for. The church was originally designed with the choir loft up in the balcony. There was 45 people, I think, in the choir at the time. Back when we first started singing up there, they said it sounded like it was a choir of 200 because it's like it's coming out of a megaphone. When the grade school would sing, they'd close off the balcony and they'd sing in the whole right side of the balcony. So there's a lot of room up there. When did we go away from that? Well, when Casey Stelter was, they'd carry him up there, but that was always, there's always a chance something can happen. I mean, I can see having instruments up front because you can damage instruments going up and down those stairwells. And then I can just throw something else out here. If you take pews out of the left side, if you took one out of the right side, maybe it would look a little more balanced. And what's up, we could ask Elaine, I'm not sure, but I think all of the bells are up in the choir loft. That could maybe be put permanently up front where a pew was, and maybe it would be used more often. It's a bunch of work to cart that stuff up and down stairs, if you've ever done it.
The clapping has stopped. It wasn't deemed appropriate. But I just remembered something, is that we also have band concerts here. So that's worth thinking about.
Well, okay, and I was just wondering, I'm just curious, you noted that the furniture would stay. Did I hear that correctly? So does that mean that the pulpit will not change? Am I okay, just...
We've talked about modifying the pulpit and using that material for the lectern.
That's what I thought I'd heard once upon a time. Has that been okayed?
No, nothing's been okayed.
It was a suggestion when they haven't made a plan for their
And does the pulpit doesn't work as a lectern? I know lecterns are smaller, I know that, but I'm just wondering, we've never had a lectern. I mean, maybe it's nice, but I would hate to see the wood from that pulpit get cut. I'm going to be honest, I would hate to see that.
When the church was rebuilt, our practice was to have just about all the choirs singing from the balcony, except for graduation and Christmas Eve. But over the years, our usage has changed quite a bit. Now at least half of the choir pieces are delivered from the front of the church. So I think this is in part an attempt to accommodate that a little more effectively.
Yes, the altar will remain exactly as it is. And I also put it to scale. I measured it, no. Any more questions, comments?
Well, I guess we can conclude tonight. We do have some carpet samples that the board has picked out, give you some ideas of the color combinations that we're looking at. We'd like some feedback. So,
I know there was talk about not using carpet, so I will investigate that further. I will go to other churches and listen.
I just wanted to comment back on the pulpit talk. There was talk at one point about cutting up the pulpit and turning part of it into a lectern and essentially making the pulpit smaller. So that necessarily wouldn't have to be done, but you may have heard that, and just to be upfront with you, that was something that was discussed that may take place. And I don't know if the pulpit in the drawing is exactly to scale as the one that it is behind me, or if it is smaller. But it's smaller or the same? Okay, the one in the drawing is smaller, I guess. Okay.
I would just like to point out that, as Russ just said, none of this has been approved, and it is 3 separate recommendations. And according to my understanding, we're going to try to have the voters vote on Monday, next Monday. And so each one is separate. They're all, so it's for the pews, it's for the carpet, and then it's for the remodel. And also, yes, definitely take a look at the carpet and see what you think. Give us some feedback. We have a lot of neutrals in hopes that it will go with any of the banners or the Christmas decor or anything else.
I'm going to bring this up. I've never mentioned it before. But since there's this talk of acoustics, would the congregation be interested in hiring someone to do a test to see what reverberation we have here, to see how it can be improved? And maybe the technician would say, nope, it's perfect. Don't do a thing.
I believe Scheidels did do an acoustic evaluation when they put in the sound system, and I didn't hear anything negative from them. And I know that Prof. Rhymes said to me one time, we have a perfect acoustic here. So I would I think new pew pads will suck up some of the sound if people are really concerned about the echo, but otherwise I haven't heard anything bad about it. I think it's how we use things around here that, could be improved perhaps.
Now, when the tour choir was here, and yes, they were masked, so that had something to do with it. And I had some difficulty in understanding their words. But I also went to that same concert in Fridley, and I really liked the acoustics in that building. I understood all the words very clearly. Now, I have older ears, so that's another thing. An older brain doesn't always function like it's supposed to.
Can I say something about that concert? It reminded me of the old TV commercial. Is it live or is it Memorex? Everybody up there with masks. Was it live or was it Memorex?
The mask did not help.
How did you couldn't tell that they were singing? I really got to ask you, what are you afraid of? Why are you wearing masks?
I've done a little bit of experimentation in here, and I think I've identified 2 problematic areas. Right over the side doors, the sound bounces around between the balcony and the wall. Then it comes out, makes a real muddy echo. I found that out by discovering that if I'm in the acoustic shadow of the back pillars, it's not so much of a problem. So if we were to put sound dampening material in there, perhaps hang heavy tapestries over the doors, that might go a long way to solving some of the acoustic issues. I've also noticed that when we have at least 200 people in here, the sound is much easier to understand because it's damped properly.
But as specified earlier, none of this, except for the carpet, involves the acoustics.
When we got our second organ back in the 1990s, the installer said that he measured the reverb time, and he said that the empty room reverberation was almost ideal for the organ. It was just right in the ideal range. If we switched a tile on the floor, it would get to be too long.
So, thank you everyone for coming. Why don't we close with the Lord's Prayer? Our Father, who art in heaven, hallowed be thy name. Thy kingdom come, thy will be done on earth as it is in heaven. Give us this day our daily bread. Forgive us our trespasses, as we forgive those who trespass against us. Lead us not into temptation, deliver us from evil. For thine is the kingdom, the power, and the glory, forever and ever. Before you go, if you want to check out the carpets or come up front and walk around up here to check out any other distances and things, we can stick around for a little bit to try to answer any more questions you might have.